Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Pastrnak sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Potter right in and goalie scores. Oh my, what a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Welcome into Bruins Tape to Tape. I am your co-host tonight, Maria from Watertown. I am joined by my ever optimistic and ever buddy, Caroline with a K. Hi, Caroline. Welcome in tonight.
Hey, Maria. I don't know how optimistic I've been in the last couple of episodes, but I'm happy to still fill that role.
Well, we have the epitome of optimism joining us tonight in that we're very excited to welcome in our special guest who's graciously agreed to record with us tonight and share her thoughts on this bizarre Bruins season, and that is Bridgette Proulx of WEEI and also a host of the Skate Podcast. Welcome in, Bridgette, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, nice to be with you guys again. This is my second time, right? So we did one last year. I feel like we were much more positive last time because they were in a better spot. they were doing well. Yeah.
Well,
what a difference
I'm sitting in the middle on the screen of bookends of positivity and optimism. I'm not sure that I can bring myself to that, but hopefully, maybe one of you can get me to change my mind. So, before we get started, we usually do our little bit of setting of the table in terms of, what is going to be on our plates for discussion tonight. And obviously, we're going to talk about the Bruins' most recent games and the fact that they not quite getting into the CBA break on the high note that we all needed them and expected them to go in on. Want to talk a little bit about whether or not we think Pasta can carry them into the promised land when they come back from the CBA break. Thoughts about when we'll see Hampus Lindholm coming out of the CBA break. Would the Bruins, this is a question, a burning question, would the Bruins seriously consider trading Brad Marchand? And also, I want to hear from you, Bridgette, because, you're out in the media and in much different circles than we are in terms of the excitement for the Four Nations tournament. But before we get started, I just want you to catch us all up on what you've been up to since the last time you were on, because you had a wonderful opportunity recently at the Women's Beanpot Tournament.
Yeah, I was the play-by-play broadcaster again for that second year in a row. So both of the years that it's been at TD Garden, we've had awesome all-female broadcasts. We've had similar crews both years. So all of the on-air people are women. Myself and, last year we had Sofia Yurskevich. This year we had Natalie Nori. We had so many talented women that it's awesome to see us all in the same place and get to all be in the same place at the same time. And then even behind the scenes, we had like 30 roles filled by women. So that was female led as well. And I found out that two other women on the production side of it were from my hometown. I didn't even know. I was like, this is crazy. Bumping. I found out one of them lives 2 minutes away from me. I'm like, how did this happen?
What?
But yeah. So it was just fun to kind of like meet people that I didn't even know and have all of us in the same place. And obviously, it's exciting to broadcast any game from TD Garden. So that's, you get a little bit of nerves with that, but it's fun.
Nice. Congratulations. Good for you. And in addition to that, you're spending time covering this team. I know you've had the opportunity to be in the locker room, for some post-game scrums, and also you have your podcast with Scott McLaughlin and Brian DeFelice, the skate pod. Good stuff, and pretty heavy, intense Bruins conversation, which is nice. It's nice to have a podcast that's devoted exclusively, to the team that you follow. And I think on Sunday, some scheduling announcements, right?
Yeah, we're excited. We always have to wait till after football season to get Sunday skate back, but this Sunday is our first Sunday skate on WEI, 9 a.m. to 11. Me, Scott, and Razor. We've been doing this for a few years now, but it always feels like it's so long in between because football season just dominates our Sunday coverage until finally, now that we're after the Super Bowl, we get hockey talk back on Sunday morning. So that's exciting.
Well, I, for one, am
As it should
excited
be.
about hearing you all again, and
Yeah.
maybe making an occasional phone call into the show on Sunday.
Occasionally,
Yes, for our listeners who haven't heard online, Maria's got her own special segment now on the show, right?
she gets, like, usually we'll start at 9 and we'll see a call within the first 10 minutes, and she's on the line, and we'll talk to her usually in the first hour.
Exactly. So if you don't get enough Maria here, you know how to listen to more of Maria on the weekends.
So let's dive right in. We had 3 games recently that the Bruins played before they went on the CBA break. They had a game against the Minnesota Wild, which they won 3-0. The following night, they faced the New York Rangers, 3-2 loss to the Rangers. Huge point swings there. And then finishing up with the Vegas Golden Knights, which that was a 4-3 loss. And I referred to that as another loss in what has become familiar, tragic Bruins fashion. So, Bridgette, I'd like to just get your thoughts because, you're deeper in the weeds and deeper in the trenches on what has been a season that has been totally out of the ordinary for the Boston Bruins for, I don't even know how far back we could go to find a season such as this. So I'd just like to get your take on, what's going on here. Are we living in bizarro land right now?
Well, it's crazy because, the Bruins haven't missed the playoffs since I was in college, which to me feels like a long time ago now. So it is different. And, coming in and covering the team 2 years ago when they had the historic number of wins, it was, it's crazy that you go from that to maybe missing the playoffs as quick as they did. And obviously the big deal is them missing Bergeron and Krejci, and the team doesn't really look like that anymore. They don't even have the same goalies. There's a lot that's changed. And truthfully, I thought that their offseason moves were pretty good. I thought that they addressed needs that they had. I thought that Elias Lindholm was probably the best option for them to add at center. Got that done. Zadorov, big, tough defenseman, somebody that you don't want to go into the corners with, somebody that could help you against Florida. Thought that was going to be great. And that it just hasn't panned out, right? Those moves looked on paper like they addressed some problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns out that Kastelik and Korpisalo were bigger moves than that. And that actually have helped it, in different ways than that. And so it's been an unexpected season. And that last loss to Vegas was really just a sour note to go into the Four Nations break on.
I think it was, to me, that's a loss that it's a good thing they went on break to shake that loss off, because you had a 3-1 lead And your special teams, once again, to Brian's point, he has said it many times on your podcast that they were treading precariously close to special teams losing games for them, and now their special teams units are in fact losing games for them.
Yeah, it seems like we're just waiting for it to somehow correct itself, but we're already, we only have 25 games left in the season, and that hasn't happened. Like, there will be little spurts where certain individuals kind of get things going. There was a stretch of the season where Brazeau had a few power play goals and was helping with that, and but there just hasn't been anything consistent with the power play, and whether it's a major personnel shakeup, adding a new coach, which they could still do. They still have a hole in their staff that they could bring some.
I know.
Which it feels like, hey, maybe bring a power play person in. That would be great. But and their penalty kill hasn't been great either. So yeah, they're giving them shorthanded goals, which is one of the most deflating things you can do in a hockey game when your power play not only doesn't score, but it gets scored against, and that's been happening to them. So it's not trending in the right direction. It's been in the bottom 5 of the league for pretty much the entire season.
I was going to say for a very sustained period of time. They've had a good many stats, in the bottom 5 of the league for quite some time. So, I know where I stand on this, but I'd like to hear from both of you on your temperature on whether or not this team actually can make the playoffs.
Well, I guess the question is, can they or should they? Can they? I think they're very tiny, right? But they could, maybe, right? We saw what happened at the end of regular season last year, where it was just like crazy right up to the last second, literally came down to a single game for one or two teams. Should they? I can't say that they should. I don't think it would do anybody any favors, because I think that they would go in and they'd be swept in the first round the way this team is. I don't know. What do you think, Bridgette?
Well, I guess you're right. Those are two different questions. And if you're in the tank for a good draft pick boat, then your answer to should they is no. If you're, there's certainly a lot of different ways to look at it. Is it, are we giving up on the season at the deadline? Is it all selling, no buying? Is it, but I think it's probably still a little bit too early to say that. And even though mathematically not great chances for the Bruins to make the playoffs, I believe they're, as of the beginning of the break, 15% chance they're going to make it. That fluctuates a lot though. So sometimes you see that and but it can change. The problem is that the trends have not been there. They did go on a good streak immediately following Montgomery being fired. Maybe they get a little something of that back. And maybe Hampus Lindholm comes in and helps, because he was a big loss. I think because he's been out for so long, we kind of forget what he was doing and how he was one of the guys lifting that team that wasn't doing well in October. And he was one of the guys that was helping on the power play. And he's a key piece to the defense. So if he's healthy and he's playing at least, up to 85% of his normal self, maybe that helps you push and go on enough of a run that allows you to even make the playoffs in the first place. And then once you get in, my philosophy has always been all bets are off once you get in.
True.
I'm sorry, but I've seen too many playoff series that the result just doesn't even go with what the season was like for them. You could be the 8th team in, last wild card, and you could be the Florida Panthers and have a great run. And so maybe we don't know Zadorov's impact yet because the playoffs haven't happened yet. Or maybe we don't know Elias Lindholm's impact yet because these were moves that were made to try to help in the postseason and we're not there. But what we're seeing so far doesn't indicate necessarily that's what's going to happen. So that's the problem. And if you're trading away Geeky and Frederick and Carlo or whomever at the deadline, that's going to drop your chances of going on that last month run as well.
Yeah, and I don't see management doing that. That would be, a potential waving of the white flag, which has never been for as long as since 2011, not in the DNA of the Boston Bruins or management. But for me, like you, Bridgette, I kept saying at the start of the season that I thought this team looked good on paper. I liked the moves that Sweeney made. I kept trying to stand behind them and say, this roster is better than how it's playing. It's a good roster. But now when we're here on February 11th and we see a team that is, up and down all season long, and, win a game, lose 2 in a row, win a couple of games in the row, and then have a heartbreaking loss, it's very difficult for me to put my eggs in that basket of feeling that they're going to make the playoffs. I agree with you. Once you get in, you're right. It's a whole new season. Everybody starts the same record.
Yep.
But, when you're looking at your roster and you've seen a pattern of, for lack of a better word, behavior, it doesn't lend itself to feeling a lot of confidence in your roster as it's currently constructed.
Yeah, I guess what I would say to that is that I, first of all, do think they're going to be selling off assets that are on expiring contracts. Right. So that means probably Frederick. Geeky, potentially, because it seems like there are teams that are interested in Geeky. But I personally think that if you can try to re-sign him, that would maybe be your better option. I personally like him, but, is he also at his highest value right now? Yes. Yeah. So there's definitely an argument to be made there as well. But him and Pasta's the only guy that's been consistent over the last month plus. So,
and we're back to one line of only one line who's able to score consistently. Right. We've been going through this for countless thousands of years now with the Boston Bruins. Jesus.
What happened to that fourth line that was just scoring?
What happened is right.
Yep.
I mean,
well, and I think for me, the reason why I am hesitant about what could happen in the playoffs, because I 100% agree. We've touted it on our podcast and everywhere that playoffs is this whole other beast, right? Like, to your point, it's a playoff fun fact that I will never forget because it is so traumatic. The fact that in 2019, the St. Louis Blues came in to January of that year, like dead last, and they went and they won the whole thing, right? And on the flip side, with the Bruins' historic season, just fell apart in the first round. But I think what gives me pause with this particular team is Maria likes to call it their mental toughness. I call it their resiliency and their ability to not spiral when, they just spiral when things start to go not their way. Of course, there's always going to be bad puck luck, right? That's one of the things I personally love about this game, right? Because a bounce here, you hit a stanchion there, and all of a sudden it's a completely different game. That's why we have 7 games per round. But the fact that you just don't know what team is going to show up from that, psychological perspective, that's what gives me pause, because they do have all that talent. And the fact that we are, jokingly relying on our wheel of misfortune to guess as to which team. Have you seen our lovely wheel of misfortune?
Oh, wow. What does it land on today?
Sadly, when we spin it, it's been accurate. So
75% accuracy right now. Although there are plenty of more things that we have seen happen on a regular basis that didn't fit on the wheel, and we're thinking about doing bingo at the next game. But anyway,
there you go. Just don't make it a drinking game; you'll be drunk.
No, my God, forget it.
Maybe we should to get through the rest of this season.
One of the things, and I'd like to, definitely hear your take on it, especially now having had the opportunity to get down to some of those scrums. One of the things that we've sort of speculated is there's maybe the role of Uncle Nick, right? That veteran who can really help take care emotionally the team and the morale and just helping people kind of move through difficulties, especially on those lower lines. That doesn't seem to exist this season, like it has in the past couple of years. What is your take? Like, is there something missing from that perspective that maybe John and company focus a little too much on the technical aspect of the game and maybe not the soft skills part? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, in terms of you couldn't. It's obvious that there's definitely a void in that hasn't been filled when Bergeron left, and when some of the other, even though they weren't captains, they were captain-like figures, because Foligno was obviously one of those guys who was a veteran who was really good at motivating and keeping people even-keeled, and I'm sure that added to the, what Maria was saying is them being more mentally tough. It's like, well, yeah, if you start to panic and you're and it's just you there, you don't have a way to rein it in. But if you have someone there that's saying, hey, wait, let's not panic. You know what I mean? Like someone there giving you advice and helping shift by shift Nick Foligno was one of those guys who was very vocal on the bench as well as in the locker room. It always helps to have those voices. And Bergeron was probably the most calming presence of all of them. This year, I would say that the voices that I hear a lot and that I think are some of those positive guys are Charlie Coyle, I think, over the past few seasons, which people might not really get a chance to see behind the scenes, but he's always seems to be a guy that's talking and vocal, and he doesn't wear a letter yet. I guess he was, he's worn it a few times, the A, this year when different people are out of the lineup, but
I think he had it when McAvoy was out of the lineup.
Yeah. So and we definitely thought that he should have been one to have gotten it 2 years ago, but that is neither here nor there.
He's a captain without a letter, for sure. And he's very well spoken. So is Brandon Carlo. I think that those two guys are two guys that are pretty good with keeping calm. And they've been in the league a long time now. It's it's kind of crazy because those are both guys that finished school after I did, and like they're young to me. But actually, I guess Carlo finished school after me. Coyle finished school before me. But but those are two guys that have kind of stepped in and tend to speak to the media a lot, and a lot of that's because they know, like the Bruins organization knows, if these guys go out there, they're going to say the right thing. They're going to be, they're going to give a good, accountable answer, but also not say anything too crazy. So they're kind of the even keel guys.
Yeah. Yep.
So what would make us feel better or more help me feel more positive about the direction that the team will potentially be going in after this break? What are the things that we need to see or want to see? Because for me, one of my biggest disappointments this year has been the defensive core of the Bruins. I was so excited when, I heard about the Zadorov signing and, the rest of the guys being healthy and having a defensive core that was touted as, one of the biggest in the league and could potentially be one of the best in the league. And they simply haven't played up anywhere near to that standard yet, in my view. And I don't think that they play as big as I expect them to play. And maybe my expectations are too high, but when I see, bodies back there, like the size of Carlo and McAvoy and Zadorov and even Hampus, he's not a small guy. And I'm like, it's so frustrating, the lack of physicality. And I'm not saying rail guys into the board, but the fact that a lot of our struggles come as a result of the opposing team just skating up the middle of our ice, virtually untouched. That's the one thing that I need to see that changes drastically and dramatically to start the second half of the season.
I think my answer to what could give you, a ray of hope and that they can actually get on track is that Swayman can be better. Jeremy Swayman is a better goalie and can be a better goalie than what he's done this year.
Yeah. And he's been getting better. He's been getting better too.
But not perfect, right? Not that any goalie is perfect, but still not quite to where I would say he was last year. Especially not where he was in the playoffs last year. He allowed up a soft goal against Vegas again that just kind of squeaked through him. And it's a difficult position, but now he's the guy. So there's no goalie rotation to sit here and argue about the way that we have over the last.
Yeah, right. And that is his.
If there ever is a goalie rotation argument that we're having, that means that he's woefully underperforming, because I don't think anyone expects him and Korpisalo to be in that same kind of conversation that him and Linus Ullmark were. So Swayman can be better. We know this. If he gets hot, as with any team that has a goalie that gets hot, there's a chance. But the problem for me is when you're in the playoffs, you need your power play to score. And I don't think that Lindholm has been the right guy on to help the power play, and as he hasn't been the right guy necessarily for your top line or even your top six. He's played on the third line. So that I almost feel like there's a void there, not just that the void that Krejci and Bergeron left, but even Jake DeBrusk last season was somebody who was getting a little bit more done on the power play than Elias Lindholm has. So there's personnel holes in that power play, and the ability to score outside of Pasternak has been inconsistent. And Geekie, I'll give him credit too, because those two kind of as a duo have been able to keep things going. So, but the problem is, I don't know if I'm as I don't think I have a reason to be as optimistic about depth scoring getting better. That's hard. That's one thing that, I mean, I love Patra. He's great. Hopefully he gets brought right back up as soon as Four Nations is done. And I think he's really creative, but sometimes like he's either not put in the lineup or he's learning through certain NHL situations on certain nights. And so it's hard to say that you can see that third line, fourth line finding a way, especially with Cassidy kind of injured. He was doing a lot and he's done a little bit less now that he's dealt with concussion and stuff. So
he was a workhorse until he got that concussion, and then he was back in the lineup for a couple of games and went back out of the lineup again. So, I would like to see that line have the, that energy line of Beecher, Casta, and Kepke, be given a little bit more opportunity to see if they can reignite the fire that they had to start the season. I was looking at, ice time over the last 3 games, and those guys weren't on the ice very much at all during these last 3 games before they went off on break, which is, I'm not quite sure I understand the rationale and thought process behind that.
Yeah. Well, I think for Kastelik, it's easing him back in and making sure he's, and I also Beecher tends to not get a lot of ice time because I think he doesn't necessarily deserve more ice time this season than he did last year. He's somebody that we very rarely talk about, but he's not scoring. He's winning some key face-offs, but like his impact has been lesser this year, I think, than last year. And Kastelik was the driving force of that line. So when he's not at 100%, then that line isn't at 100%. So it's a real bummer too, because you mentioned adding players in the offseason that were fighters and that are tough. And this team was on paper supposed to be one of the toughest teams in the NHL because Frederick can fight. You have Kastelik, who we've seen come in and fight, but now he should be more careful, obviously, with the head injury and Zadorov. But I just don't feel like if you ask me if is this one of the toughest teams in the league, I would say no.
Hey, Bruins fans, have you gotten your gear for the Four Nations Face-Off yet? There's still time to show your support for your favorite Bruins playing this month. Shop the NHL store with us by clicking the link in our show notes and get free shipping on orders of $24 or more now through February 7th.
This NHL season has been as unpredictable as a puck rolling on its edge. No one knows where it's going, but that just means there's time for your favorite team to figure things out. Fingers crossed that my Boston Bruins figured things out, and games left for you to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win, or my favorite bet is an anytime goal scorer. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. And if you are new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
No, so for these bottom line guys, a question that I've seen come up a lot, full disclosure, my dad is constantly texting me and I'm like, I don't work for the Bruins. I can't give you this answer. But, with some of these bottom six guys, especially these younger ones like Beecher, why would management then not, take a little bit more risk and bring up some of those kind of cusp guys from Providence? We've not really seen anything with Lysell. He wasn't even really part of the batch that came up when we had a flurry of injuries. Lethierry was doing a great job. Any of these guys, if you're not getting much of anything from Beecher, just to use him as an example, then why not take a chance on bringing someone else?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been stretches of the season where you wish they would have tried Lysell sooner.
Yeah.
Besides just one game that we thought, he's probably going to stick around. He didn't play bad. And then turns out it was predetermined that no matter how he played, he was going to go back down. And we didn't really think that was the right thing to do. And I think a lot of people this season are looking at prospects and saying, well, what's on the ice right now isn't producing a lot. So maybe
why not
have this high-end skilled skater down in Providence who's been itching to get in and hasn't been given an opportunity to even win a spot when other guys haven't done enough to keep their spots. So I think for me, the reason why Beecher is going to stay there is because, first of all, it's a waiver situation. If they put him on waiver, it's probably going to get claimed. But in an injury situation, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but Oliver Wahlstrom doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Yeah.
And at least not yet.
He shows flashes, but so does everyone else, and predominantly everybody else in this lineup. So he isn't any more different than the Beechers or the Lysells or the Matty Patras at this juncture. So I'm not quite sure I understand why we keep pulling one guy out and putting another guy in.
Yeah, he was a kind of a a surprise, confusing claim off of waivers when, again, like you said, I don't think he's bad, but we've got like 5 other guys just like him, both on the roster right now in Boston, and probably a handful of guys down in Providence who, all right, maybe they would be like him, but you don't know because you haven't seen them play at that level. It seems very, very much so like there's some spinning of wheels and just trying to do the same thing over and over again in the hopes that, okay, next game, it's going to happen. And it's like, I don't know. It makes no sense to me. This is probably one of the more confusing seasons for me as a fan and trying to understand what the heck are you guys doing? What are these decisions? I don't know.
And who knows? Maybe Fabian Lysell will get a real shot at some point, and then he's bad, and then we're like, oh, I get why, what they saw that wasn't. But as of right now, like, it's unfair to judge him because he has essentially no NHL experience. He's got 1 game, barely played any time. So he's somebody that I wish would have gotten a few games at the very least, because then you're able to look at the trade deadline and you're able to look at these further down the road marks of, okay, well, he actually solved this problem, or he didn't, and now we know, like, we need someone else, or it's just a question that we'll never really know the answer to because he didn't get called up, and I don't think he's getting called up again this season just based on their unwillingness really to. It turns out the one of the main factors as to why he got called up that first time was because his parents were in town. And he had been playing well, so they threw him a bone. But it wasn't a legit chance to make the NHL. So,
and with him, all I can think of is Jack Studnicka. Like, I just see kind of the situation, not necessarily in terms of skill and ability, but just kind of how management is handling him, right? I'm like, you gotta throw him in to the deep end with the big boys to really see if he can do it. And to your point, thinking about the trade deadline, maybe he is that special thing that at least gets you across the finish line. Or if he's not, at least he's gotten some of that ice time, and other teams have seen him.
Yep.
And they can say, oh, he doesn't work for Boston and their system and whatever, but he would be exactly what we need on this other team, right? You can't even, like, what are you going to do with him? He's stuck. You're stuck. Nobody's being served by this.
Yeah. I think he's the most perplexing one.
Do you think there's any chance that Don Sweeney stands pat at the trade deadline?
No way. No.
Can't.
No, there's going to be, okay. I think he's going to make multiple moves. I think that I'd be surprised if there are anything crazy, but they're going to be there's at least a few common sense ones that he should do right off the bat, and you remember when he did the press conference following Montgomery getting fired, he said, we're going to identify players on this team that we think are going to be part of our long-term future, who want to be part of our long-term future. Well, if they have identified players that do not fit into that category, those are guys that, maybe it's time to move on from now. If you've identified that they're not going to be here, don't want to be here, and guys who you're going to get nothing for if you let them go to the off season, they're going to leave as free agents. That's common sense. And I do believe Frederic has value to other teams. You're not a good enough team to keep him as your own rental. So you're probably trading Trent Frederic.
Oh, yeah.
I'd honestly be surprised if he didn't get traded at this point.
Right.
And I think Emily Kaplan reported during the games this weekend that Bruins were getting calls about Trent Frederic, which would be fine by me as long as you're getting something of value. Now, you're not going to get break the bank money for Trent Frederic because, again, like everyone else on this team, has had a very inconsistent performance throughout the course of the season. But I certainly don't want Sweeney just giving guys away for the mere fact that I've got to do something or we're going to lose him anyways type of scenario. And, what you just said, Bridgette, resonated with me because I said a very similar thing in one of our snapshots episode. And I think it was right after the Vegas game where I said at this point in time, I want Don Sweeney and Cam Neely or whoever Bruins management is going to be moving forward to identify who they want the core of this team to be, and then start making decisions and building around that core that they have identified.
Yeah. And I would say, like, Trent Frederick, it's hard to say what he would get, what he would bring in, because he's probably going to a contender and playing on a fourth line. He's probably going in, he's either third or fourth line. That's the highest, but normally teams that are contenders are already pretty deep. So that lends itself for like when the Bruins added Garnet Hathaway. Yeah. And he comes in and he's a guy who can fight and be physical and play on the fourth line. But I don't even think we've seen that from Frederick this year with our own eyes throughout the whole regular season. So can he change things in the playoffs? Of course he can, but why can't he do it in the regular season too then? Like there's a certain that doesn't take skill. No. What he's missing out on. Like, it takes a willingness to go out there,
an enthusiasm, a determination. And how much more enthusiasm or incentive do you need when you're in a contract year? That's what's so maddening to me.
Yep. Yeah, because we had how many players in the past literally 12 months have we seen be in a contract year and either go above and beyond or completely just fall apart, right? Jeremy Swayman, phenomenal end to this season. This season, we've got Brad Marchand having one of the best years he's had in recent memory. Geeky as well, but then Frederick falling apart under the pressure, right?
Most people in their contract years play like, they're on fire. It's human nature to want to set yourself up to make more money and to get rewarded and it's a subconscious thing as well for most people. So yeah, it's perplexing. Yep. It is kind of a no-brainer move for Don Sweeney because you could get something for him. Yep. He hasn't been overly, he's not an integral part of your team, in my opinion, because there are other guys who could come in and fill that spot on the third line.
You've got plenty of Jags around.
You could, you could put Wallstrom. You could bring up, there's Letary. There's people that can come in and give you minutes there that I don't think you're going to necessarily notice a huge drop off from what Frederick's been this year. What he was last year is different. He had a great year last year. So,
So here's a question for both of you. Depending on the health of Hampus Lindholm and how he looks coming back, I mean, I'm assuming we'll see him in the lineup. I haven't heard anything, but my hope is that he's back in the lineup to start after the Four Nations tournament. Would you, if you were GM, would you entertain any offers on Brandon Carlo?
Ooh. That's the one that I've been thinking about this week because Emily Kaplan brought him up on her report during the broadcast against Vegas. And I think the way that she worded it was like other teams have been calling about Brandon Carlo. Not like the Bruins are trying to shop Brandon Carlo, but like other teams are showing interest. So clearly there's a market for him. Yeah. And if you can get a decent deal done, because maybe this is a guy that his price may be higher than we even know if there's multiple teams that are looking to add someone like him. The problem is they don't have a lot to replace behind him, not the same way that they can replace Trent Frederick. Yeah. And also, like I mentioned earlier, I do think they value his locker room presence and the kind of leader that he is. I personally think of the Bruins defensemen, he's probably the most, leaderly of them. But yeah, so there's other intangibles.
But if you're a team on the cusp, right? If you're a team on the cusp, then you have 1 foot in the playoff line and 1 foot outside of the playoff line, and you're presented with an opportunity to do what we talked about doing just a couple of minutes ago, identifying the core moving forward and building around that core. Don't you think that, I mean, your ears have to be open to listening and really doing some soul searching. And, I have my thoughts about whether or not I want this management team to be the ones making those soul searching decisions. But, you have to do your due diligence as a GM, because clearly this recipe that you've put together for this season, there's something missing. There's an ingredient missing, or there are too many ingredients that are impacting, what you're putting out to us. So, I would definitely at least listen, as long as it's just not something, totally ridiculous. Right. But I think all offers have to be open to any and all offers, I would think, at this point in time, on anybody on this roster, because that's really the only thing the Bruins have of value right now to work with.
Yep.
Their most valuable assets are on their current NHL roster.
Right. Yeah.
I think that they are taking every possible call. I think they're entertaining most conversations, from what it sounds like. So it's just trying to make difficult decisions, because there are some decisions that are going to be so difficult that we haven't even really talked about them, which is what's going to happen with Brad Marchand.
Right? I was just going to bring him up. You read my mind. Do you think there, in any real world scenario, there would be any chance that the Bruins would trade Brad Marchand?
I want to say no, but the business, it's also business. So sometimes the right thing to do goes out the window. And the longer that I'm in this business, the more I see it. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. How could they do that? And it's like, it's business. That's something you have to deal with. And there's been no extension made, right? So that's how this conversation starts to come up, because he would be very, very, very valuable to a team. But what do you want for him?
Yeah.
And are you willing to part ways with someone who's been in your organization since day one?
And are you willing to risk, right? I know it's a business, and the players say that it's a business, but they have feelings too, right? So are you willing to risk potentially making him feel like, what the hell? I've been here my entire career. I'm a captain, and they would trade me away. Families rooted here. These are all things that, because they're human. These players are still.
That's what makes
human.
me say I want to say no. I want to say no, that it would be the wrong thing to do, on a human level, and maybe even on a business level, because you're putting a bad reputation out there for yourself, and he's not a bad player. So that's why you would, if people are calling about Marchand, they're probably only listening if they're giving them back a really good package, but that would also be waving the white flag for sure. That would be the number one sign that we're done this year. Because if you get rid of him, then what? No, not happening this year. So,
and I don't think ownership has an appetite for that. I really, really don't. I think their heads would implode if the Bruins don't make the playoffs and they don't have a playoff gate coming in to that building.
Will tell you one thing: I don't want to go in that locker room if Brad Marchand gets traded, because there's been days I've been in that locker room that it felt like somebody died, and that would be one of those situations where you never really expect, you idolize these people and you see them, they're these big athletes and they're strong and they have all of these admirable qualities, and then you the weirdest day that I ever had covering the team was when they lost Game 7, the season that they won the historic number of games. We go down, and it was the weirdest vibe I've ever had in any room, not just the locker room, just actively seeing people crying that, like, you never expected in your life to see, crying and upset like that. And, that would be another one of those moments, I think, where you would walk into a room and you would feel this devastation.
Well, and it must have been, I would say, just from the response from players in interviews when Jim Montgomery was just, in that case, I think they had to have known it was coming because, again, the business of the NHL. But I think for me, I am fairly firmly in that would just be one of the worst mistakes that they could possibly make for the franchise from that perspective. And again, whenever I make this argument online or in our Discord group, I'm like, look, full disclosure, he's my favorite player. I get it. I would never want to see my favorite player be traded away. But you also have to truly recognize his value to the franchise and what would happen to the room, to the fan base. I think maybe Sidney Crosby isn't a good example because maybe he would want to be traded to go win another cup, like a Ray Bourque situation. But, would Toronto just all of a sudden trade away Austin Matthews in 5 or 6 years? Or Edmonton's never going to trade away Connor McDavid. And I'm not saying that he is of that elite, scoring talent, but he represents something. And he not just represents the franchise, but he also represents the last cup run. He is it. It. So do you want to ruin that legacy of that core group in that team? For what? Give him you know what I'm saying? And if you don't want to, if you don't want him anymore, and I know this would be, they would never do this because this is leaving too much money on the table, then just don't sign him and let him leave and put it on him to leave. Do you know what I'm saying? From that perspective, I don't think that they would, like I said, want to let that kind of money walk away, that value walk away. But I think the situation with him is much more complicated because of all of those reasons. It's not the same.
They just went through this whole centennial celebration the last 2 years where he has been a guy that's been honored as a legend and has met certain benchmarks of he is this good out of all the players we've had over 100 years. He's at the top of the top.
He's at the top of a lot of lists right now as a Boston Bruin.
Yep. And he's not done. You give him one more year, give him what I like to call, the Bergeron old man contract. And he's going to continue to climb up some of those records. I mean, how can you do that?
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense from
to me,
the very big picture.
This is going to be something that gets talked about up until the trade deadline. It's going to probably gain steam, and which is an annoying thing for the players who are hearing about, certain things come up and trying to avoid it, but they're hearing it. It's going to be talked about a lot more. And there'll probably be people reporting that they know exactly what's going to happen. And, and so, yeah, but I think that my gut feeling is that he doesn't get traded. And I don't think that it's, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm sure that there's calls coming in about it.
Yeah.
There has to be.
Well, and do you think, switching gears just a tiny bit, that, I mean, yes, obviously if you're a GM, you should take all the calls, right? But do you think there's any urgency on management's behalf that oh no, we really have to make sure that we do something? Because I don't know, is there a concern around Don Sweeney still being GM at the end of this season? I mean, we've all heard the chants, I've not been a super huge fan, and I've certainly never been a fan of Cam Neely. So is there a little bit of like nerves, like we got to get this right for our own selves?
Well, yeah, there's a few huge things that are coming up for them. And the trade deadline is not just about, though, of course, if they don't make the playoffs, at least Don Sweeney has a higher chance of not surviving that. So you have to make a move as if you're trying to keep on to the course of this is just a retool, not a rebuild. This is a team that we're gonna do the best, get our money for the stuff that we think might leave us at the end of the day in free agency for nothing, and then it's you basically there's no scenario where he does nothing because that means he's just giving up and that means he's giving up his job. So you have to be able to probably make the case that, okay, this makes our team better now. And we have this plan for the future if you just let us stick around and ride it out. And it's tough because sometimes a GM in that situation maybe isn't doing the best thing for the next 5 years for your team. They're doing what's best for them right now because they don't have 5 years to figure it out. They have to figure it out in the next few months or they're losing their job if they miss a playoff.
Yeah. Does he, in your mind, does he lose his job if they don't make it?
Historically, that's something that tends to happen. So
if they make it and they get embarrassed, is that the same outcome?
Probably. And maybe if it's just like, oh, they kind of made it in, they just squeaked in.
Right, on a technicality, because
if they make it in not on their own merits, but because one of the other teams that they're, chasing falters and they haven't gotten in on their own merits, I'd say you need to look at that very closely too when making a decision about whether or not you want to move forward with this management team for future build of the Bruins.
I think that Jim Montgomery almost got fired last year if they hadn't won that first round of the playoffs against Toronto.
I agree with you.
Playoffs, like even if you make it, it's not good enough for a team that expects to be a contender. So.
I agree with you. I think he was on a very short leash, which we saw what happened to him. Bridgette, my question for you right now is, just went right out of my head. What are two questions. One is on the Four Nations tournament, how closely you're going to be, watching, covering, writing about this tournament, considering that, it's literally next week, it'll be in our backyard here.
Yeah, so I have a credential for the Boston location. Scott and I were thinking about going to Montreal, but because it's so long, I would have to miss a few broadcasts. I didn't want to miss my other job. So we are not going up to Montreal, though we would love to, because that's the only place where that US-Canada match is guaranteed.
Right.
Most people around here are hoping for a US-Canada final.
Boston
gets to see it too. But as of, because of the logistics of it, we're not going up for the Montreal half of it, but really excited to be there for the Boston part of it, going into the locker rooms, talking to the guys. I'm excited to go talk to some of the Team Canada guys who we don't get to see a lot, like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby. There are certainly people around that are going to be in town that don't get to be here. People don't get to come see them a lot. And because this is Olympic-esque, with at least these four teams would be, close to what the Olympics team versions of these teams would be. I like Olympic hockey so much that this kind of feels like, even if I don't get to go up, which I want to Italy next year for the Olympics, it's like a little taste of it. So happy about that.
Good for you.
I love that it's actually going to be more competitive than the All-Star game, right? Like people go out and they just kind of skate around. it's not the same. And yes, it's not the same as the Olympics because, you know, certainly there are fans out there who are not particularly excited for it because it doesn't mean anything. And I get it. But I think that the players who are participating are going to, they're going to lean in and they're going to give us as close to an experience of watching, Olympic World Cup hockey. And I'm excited to see that because it will be also a heck of a lot less stressful watching these guys.
What we've been watching.
You can't lose.
Well, you can tell that the players themselves, this has a great deal of meaning and significance for them, to be able to pull on their country's jerseys and, compete with players that they probably played with when they first started out in the league or as, just developing hockey players. And I think I saw a quote from Brad Marchand who basically said, I don't care what line they ask me to play on, or even if they ask me to fill water bottles, I'm just happy to be there.
Yeah. No, it's true. This means a lot for them. And that's what, and I know for USA fans, they're probably hoping Sidney Crosby sits this out, but I feel like it wouldn't be the same if him and if the bigger name people weren't there. So I'm hoping just for the entertainment value that he's there and everybody stays healthy and we get to enjoy it and not have to sit around and talk about, oh, wow, McAvoy shouldn't have played because, he was already kind of injured or something like that. That would be the worst case scenario, but I'm trying to not think about
We're not going to think about it.
Brain. But we'll be there, writing, and we'll be doing Sunday skates and the skate pod throughout that. So I'm sure we'll be talking of a combination of Bruins and Four Nations the next 2 weeks.
And so I have one closing question, just because I like to stir the pot a little bit.
All right.
So
what about that?
Yeah, the Bruins were on the national broadcast recently. I think it was on TNT, and Don Sweeney was interviewed by the national guys, made himself available to the TNT broadcast crew to take softball questions from them about the Four Nations tournament. Yet all of you, Scott, Ty Anderson, many others who are covering this team from the start of the season until the season is over. And when is the last opportunity that you had to ask open questions of Don Sweeney? It bothered me tremendously for all of you.
Yep. He spoke last when Montgomery got fired, openly to the media. That was the last time.
And he had to, right? It's not like he couldn't.
Yeah, that is kind of one of the mandatory ones. And then the trade deadline will be the next kind of mandatory one. So,
right. But again, he's able to kind of hide behind the set topic. Nope, we're just going to talk trade and deadline. I'm not going to talk, I mean, people will, it doesn't mean people won't try.
Oh, yeah,
but
people
he
will
has
ask.
an out. He has an
out. I guess he does. But at the same time,
it just bugged me. I'm like, you're on national television and these folks are all busting their butts all season long. You can't give them 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah. It's, basically, I think that the TNT broadcast, as a broadcaster, and I play both sides, right? Because I work for Hockey East in my other job. So we could have a guest on, and yes, I'm probably going to ask isn't this great? Positive questions and what have you. I do think they got in one question at the end about, it wasn't a hard hitting question, but it was, a serious topic. It was a Bruins topic about, what are your deadline plans, right? So yeah, we haven't had a chance to ask him that. But we're kind of used to that. I think we're not used to hearing from him too much.
Drive me crazy. All right, we're going to go around the horn quickly.
Yeah.
How do we think? Start with you, Bridgette, as our guest.
Mm-hmm.
How do we think the second half of the season will ultimately go for the Boston Bruins?
As in, make or miss?
Make or miss.
I have struggled with this so bad. So I'm the kind of person who's if you ask me to gamble on anything, I won't. And I don't like to make predictions because like I don't know. I want them to make it. I feel like they have the ability to turn it around, but also logic tells me that we haven't seen it yet. So how can I say that? So, whereas probably a month ago, I would have said yes. I'm feeling more like a no these days. But I still am too optimistic to give you like 100% no.
Yeah. For me, it's going to come down to literally the last week, I think. So it's like a non-answer because I think it's literally going to come down to that.
By the last week, like they honestly could be out of it by that point.
They could. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the opposite of that doodlebug race this year with, those 5 teams all within 2 points of each other. It's actually going to be, if you're just a hockey fan, I think a fantastic end to the season.
But or
you're a Bruins fan, oh my God.
If one of your teams is about to make it or not make it, and every single night, every time you see them get a bad loss, you're just like, you want to
go again,
go to sleep and not talk about it. But
yep, we're gonna get a lot of use out of the wheel.
Yeah, I have them, and I want to be wrong. I'm gonna put this out on the record. I want to be wrong, but I have them not making the playoffs. I just can't bring myself to convince myself that based on what I've seen, based on, the other teams, that how they have been playing and the fact that some of these other teams have been able to put runs together, which has propelled them into playoff positioning. I just, I don't see it happening this season, but I want to be wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if they had ended on 2 wins, I probably would have been more of a yes. Like if they'd come in February and won, so they only had 4 games. And they won the first 2. If they had then won the next 2, totally feel like it's a different conversation we're having right now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But the manner in which they lose these games is it's a very troubling pattern, and it's a very troubling cycle. And they still haven't shown that they've been able to fight their way out of this cycle. So, again, I want to be wrong, folks. And I would love to have a little bit of the optimism that Bridgette and my friend Caroline have, but I'm not sure I can muster it.
It's an interesting spread, a yes, a no, and like if they get in, it's not on their merit. That's me. I'm like,
I just like to do my job. Like I'm one of the random like weird people who just likes my job so much that I don't want it to end early. My coworkers. I enjoy going to the games. I have to be optimistic because that's what I want to continue to be. Going to work and going and having Sunday skate and as much as I like summer and vacation, it's okay if it waits until June and we're still talking about hockey in May or that's why I can't bring myself all the way.
Yeah, there you go.
I admire that. Thank you, Bridgette. Thank you for giving us your time, your insight, and your opinions. We really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughtful approach to answering our questions.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thank you for having me again.
And tell us again, for our listeners who maybe didn't hear you guest spot with us last year, where can they find you and your show?
So we have the Skate Pod, which you can watch on YouTube or find also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
That's our we normally do 3 times a week episodes, mostly based on Bruins coverage. And Sunday Skate is every Sunday on on the actual radio, or you can listen on the Odyssey app on WEI, 9 a.m. to 11 with me, Scott and Razor. And then if you want to read what I write, that's on WEI.com. If you just search my name or even just search Bruins, you'll see me and Scott's work go up there.
Yeah.
Or you can watch me on Nesson.
When do you sleep? Yikes.
Friday at 6:30, I have a show on Nesson called This Week in Hockey East. Usually right after that, I have a broadcast of some sort at some college. So we could do that too.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely.
Yowza. I'm tired just listening to you, but so thank you. Even we owe you even greater thanks for giving up this time with such a busy schedule. But we really appreciate it, and we thoroughly enjoy the podcast, and I'm so excited about the show being back on the air on Sunday mornings because yeah.
Well, as always, again, thank you to our special guest, Maria. Thank you for hosting this week. Make sure you rate and review the podcast to help us reach more listeners, and tune in weekly to this podcast on Wednesdays and our special snapshots, typically after each game. Any final thoughts and words, Maria?
I am looking forward to getting on a plane Monday morning and heading to warmer parts.
Yes.
So I will be watching some of the Four Nations game, but hopefully from an outdoor bar in Fort Lauderdale.
Yep. So right. So we have some special episodes coming up during the break, and some special snapshots. So while Maria's on vacation, you still get to listen to some fantastic stuff from us here at Bruins Tape to Tape. But as always, go Bees!
Go Bees!